Hey, are you getting ready to go to Philmont and you have a dietary restriction, like a food allergy or a religious need? Well, this video is for you. Hey, real quick, right before we jump into this video, if you'd do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Also, thank you for subscribing to this channel. If you'd like to be notified of future videos, please hit that bell icon. Have a great day and enjoy this video. Cy, so I understand you just got back from Philmont this past summer. So that was your trek was in July of 2022, and you went on a 10-day trek, and you survived because you're here talking to me.
Yes, thank you.
And so you're a vegetarian, is that correct?
Yes, I am. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so you had some special challenges to navigate as a vegetarian.
Right.
So I appreciate you coming in and being on the channel and kind of sharing with others that may have a dietary restriction, whether it be a vegetarian or diabetic or gluten-free or whatever that might be, to give them some ideas to think about, some things that you experience that they can learn from. So I appreciate you being here and taking some time to go through this with me.
Thank you, Al, for having me.
So, you know you're going to go to Philmont, right? I mean, you know a year or more in advance. And so I'm just curious, what kind of questions or concerns did you have when you're kind of thinking about going to Philmont? You're preparing for Philmont. I know you're buying equipment and you're going on training hikes. You're doing all this stuff to prepare. But with your dietary challenge, talk to me about what questions and concerns that you had.
Thank you. I'm an ovo-lacto vegetarian, which means I can eat cheese and eggs. But the biggest intimidation factor for my Philmont trip was around food. Will I be able to survive with the food that I will get at Philmont? But the biggest question also was, can I take my own food? The short answer to the question is yes, but as you're watching this video till the end, you'll find out what that really means. The next one I also had was, if I can carry my own food, should I have to carry all 10 days worth of food? That was also another thing because, there's a lot of weight ramifications when you have to carry 10 days worth of food on top of what you're going to get from the Philmont staff for the rest of the crew.
Yeah, that would be an enormous challenge to think through. And one of the perks of going to Philmont is you're backpacking, but a normal crew, per se, right, they're going to pick up food
Right.
2 or 3, maybe 4 times during the trek. So they're only carrying 2 to 4 days worth of food at a time. And then that's obviously a very legitimate question you had. Since I have a dietary restriction, right, am I going to have to completely support myself going to Philmont? And then does that mean that I'm going to have to carry all the food that I would need for myself for the entire trek? And from someone who's done a lot of backpacking, carrying 10 days worth of food is almost impossible. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible, but it would be very, very daunting, heavy, take up a lot of space in your pack. That would just be an enormous challenge.
Great. And then, the last thought was, if I was able to take my own food, will Philmont be able to give some money back for the meals that I'm not taking from Philmont? The answer to that, short answer to that is no. But Philmont has made it very convenient, especially in the last few years, for people with special dietary needs to make this trip very easily.
Okay, great.
Now, is there a list of food options, whether you want some halal meal or you want some kosher meals, or people like me, vegetarian, gluten-free? Yes, there's a list of all the food options that Philmont will provide for your entire trip on their website. One thing that I am going to encourage the staff at Philmont, especially people answering the phones and emails, is to make sure that they understand that people on the other end would want to see the ingredients of the food. It's all listed on the website. A simple Google search will give that to you. But somehow when I emailed the staff twice and called them once, they were not really able to give me a clear answer. And that added to some anxiety. But fortunately, before the trip, I was able to find it on the Philmont website with regard to all the ingredients.
So, in my preparation for Philmont treks, one of the great things that Philmont does is they do publish their intended menu. I say their intended menu because, as we all know, in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, with demand, supply and demand, and the menu might change, right? But that aside, there is a published menu of their intended meals for you to have on your trek. Now, honestly, I'm not for sure exactly how far in advance that menu gets published. Most treks start in June. I think by March or so, it's up on the Philmont website, maybe earlier.
Right.
But, I know you did a little more research probably than the average person. For me, I just pull it up, say, oh, these are the meals we're going to have. Or you can certainly look at the previous year's meals, right? Say, okay, this is kind of what they had, right? And there's certainly no guarantee that the previous year's menu will be the same menu. Like the 2021 and 2022 were a good example. In 2021, the menu between 2021 and 2022 changed dramatically. Okay. And so I can imagine the anxiety. You're trying to understand what's available to you, what is actually in those meals, right? And so that's a good point to Philmont, is if you can get in touch with someone that actually knows what's going to be in those meals, or somehow make it easier for someone as yourself looking for, hey, this is the menu, but specifically, I want to know exactly what's in each of these meals, because the Philmont menu, it's great that they give it to you, but then it's a little cryptic, right? And not sometimes extremely descriptive as exactly what it is. And it's a little too late to find out once you're out in the backcountry, right? You need to know that in advance.
And then, for people that have the necessity to store food in a fridge, that's a question that I had myself. And the answer to that is, you cannot take food that requires storage in a fridge, but any other trail food that meets your dietary restrictions or requirements, rather, you're more than welcome to take it. As you know, Al, there's no electricity for fridge and other kind of modern day luxuries on the back trail, the backcountry. So that's one of the reasons why Philmont does not have this option for hikers.
And it could be challenging for some to imagine. So for me, having a lot of backcountry experience, just understood that you're not going to have access to any electricity, right? You're not going to have any refrigerators. There's certainly no air conditioning. That comes along with going backpacking. And then you get into kind of Philmont world, and then you have all these staff camps, and the staff cabins, for the most part, have refrigerators and running water and, kitchens, full kitchens for the most part, right? And so it could be inferred that someone could say, hey, I could just throw some food in the staff cabin, right? But the reality is, and understandably, that's not going to happen. That's not going to be available to you. So if you were to bring something on your own, you need to understand that there's not going to be any access to anything that is refrigerated. You're going to have to carry all of that on your own.
That's
right. Anything you take with you. So we talked about some of your preparation as far as like trying to do research on the food and the ingredients. Was there anything else specifically you did to prepare? I mean, I know your crew probably went out on training hikes and you probably practiced cooking and things of that nature, but was there anything specific to, hey, I'm going to have this challenge. Was there anything specific you did to help prepare yourself?
One thing that I did not do enough of is eating the food that I was going to take on the trip. And that's something that I would very strongly recommend, because that gives you an idea to make sure that the food that you're taking will actually be a proper fit for your gut. That's something that I would very strongly recommend.
And for me, even though I don't have a dietary restriction per se, I just know from doing this thousands of times that it takes my stomach 3 or 4 plus days to kind of adjust to backcountry type food. And so that would be wise advice for anybody. Hey, look up what the past meals were for, Philmont, if you don't have the current year's list on there, and get those meals and see how your stomach reacts to those. And then also be aware that that could change based off of altitude and the water. You're filtering water out of the backcountry. And so all those things, even with all that, understand that your experience could change even when you get out there. So like I always recommend that crews bring, medication to help, cope with any gastrointestinal issues that
Right.
they might experience.
Yep. Good point.
So, Sai, I know that you knew what to take as far as going backpack, all your sleeping bag, all that stuff. But was there anything that you took personally to, say, hey, I might need to have this to help me out?
Philmont does a great job in making sure that anybody with special food meals have an extra pair of vessels to cook. But what you should do is also make sure that you have an extra stove just for the special dietary needs. And the reason why is when you're cooking, you can cook in parallel with the people that don't have any dietary restrictions and be done at the same time. So this is a big recommendation from me is, first your own food, and make sure you also have your own cooking vessels and cooking stove.
Okay. So once you arrived at Philmont, okay, you've met your ranger, you're did you bring up to your ranger? Did you talk to anybody at Philmont? Once you kind of showed up, specific to your dietary, needs, walk me through that. How did that happen, if anything?
Sure. And, this was a very important stuff that is listed on the website, but there's just a one-line mention of it. As soon as we got there, I spoke to my ranger about my specific dietary requirement. She was very well informed about what needed to happen next. So the first thing we did was we went to logistics and we told them that, I have arrived and I have a special dietary requirement. They had that information already from registration. From that point on, we actually went to the commissary at the base camp rather. And then we got a list of all meals that I would need substitutions for. And the commissary folks were able to give me everything that I needed substitutions for. There were a few meals that I had myself on me that I gotten here from home. So we took everything from commissary and took it back to logistics to give it to them, and we labeled it using the same labeling terminology that Philmont uses, and they were successfully able to bring that and drop it off with the meals for the rest of the crew. So the process was very simple, but this is an important process that your ranger would advise you of.
All right, so Sai, you kind of touched on it. I just want to make sure. So when you showed up, Philmont, you told your ranger, Philmont staff, the ranger, logistics, the commissary down at base camp, you felt like once you showed up, that you were well taken care of. You kind of had an expectation of what to expect in the backcountry. They made sure that you had all of your, meals lined out before you left base camp, so that when you I guess when you left base camp, did you feel like you're going to have any surprises, or did you kind of have a good idea what was going to happen?
I thought I might be, I would be having some surprises because there's so many people, about 18,000 people this summer, and I couldn't imagine how Philmont could get everything in line and have the meals delivered at the right commissary in the backcountry. But to my pleasant surprise, there's absolutely no hiccups. And I also talked to a few other people with special dietary needs, and none of them had any issues getting their meals in the backcountry. So I really want to take this opportunity to thank Philmont for doing a phenomenal job in bringing food for people with dietary needs.
As a part of all that, did they give you anything special cooking-wise? I guess I should clarify, your crew did the traditional Philmont Scout Ranch cooking method. So that being said, was there anything that they wanted to make sure you had before you left the backcountry?
Absolutely. They wanted to make sure that, people with special dietary needs have had their own vessels to cook, vessels to clean, using the same vessels, of course, and then also cleaning supplies. So everything was completely separated, and that's something that I really appreciated because there's no contamination of any kind throughout the trip. So that's one thing that I would make sure that people understand. If you want to prepare kosher meals, they also give you new equipment and not old equipment. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
And that is really important. I've had to cook for people that have had dietary restrictions. Mm-hmm. And like, for example, one person was extremely sensitive to gluten. Mm-hmm. And to the point of we almost really couldn't prepare her food in the same kitchen as we prepared everything else. Even though we had her own separate, cooking, pots and pans and knives and preparation area and all that. So that would be very important to know that Philmont does have sterile and clean pots and pans for you to use. To meet your needs, because the last thing they want and you want is to have an issue out in the backcountry.
Correct.
Right. So I understand from our conversation that your crew did the Philmont cooking method. Mm-hmm. So that's easy enough for everybody to find out how to do. So that's what your crew's doing, but explain what you did for yourself to cook for yourself.
Absolutely. Mine was actually a little bit easier than the rest of the crew. Because, when I got dinner for me or when I got meals for me, they came in individually wrapped, pre-cooked packets. So all I had to do was take the packet, put it in hot water, and once the meal was hot enough, I could just eat. So I was done faster than everybody else from a cooking standpoint, cleaning standpoint as well. So I would say having special meals, one of the benefits would also be that you would be eating faster or eating quicker than everybody else.
So let me understand that correctly. So the meal was already pre-cooked. Mm-hmm. All you had to do was warm it up.
That's it.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty amazing.
You could eat it from the packet and then, clean up the packet like you would normally do and dispose of it.
Wow. Okay. So really, you're cooking on your own, completely separate.
Correct.
Independent from your crew, and that would be something that would be really important to know for other folks that are going to have maybe even more extreme dietary restrictions, in that your cooking and food and equipment and all that is completely separate.
Correct. And then you can carry your own pots as well, so it's completely separate from the rest of the crew, right?
Okay. So your own pots, I guess you had your own stove?
I had my own stove.
So you didn't necessarily have to have your own fuel. You probably had your own fuel.
Yes.
So you were completely separate, mm-hmm. and you had your own pots, your own stove, your own fuel. Let's say your own fuel,
yep.
Right? Your own food, right? So you're completely independent. There really wasn't any integration of your food with the crew. Does that also include like the breakfast and the lunches and the meals that are kind of more snack food? Is that true for those meals as well?
Let me actually break that down a little bit further. So breakfast and lunch are usually trail food. So what that means is you can actually be hiking. You could be eating while you're hiking. You don't have to stop and cook food. That's the only thing that I think I would have done a little different. What I didn't plan was bringing in enough vegetarian dry snack foods or trail food. I got a lot of, I planned it so that all my dinners, which are cooked every day separately, they were fine, but I didn't take a lot of veggie snack food. So some of the veggies, some of the food that they gave had meat sticks in them, and then meat in those meat sticks, and I could eat them. But that's the only thing that I would suggest that you do, is make sure that you look at the breakfast and the lunch menu as well, and replace them with whatever you want. Take them to logistics, drop it off, and they'll bring it to the commissary for you to pick up as you're on the trip.
Oh, wow. So you could give them snack food. Hey, I'll need this. And then they'll make sure that it shows up in the backcountry at the commissary. So when your crew's picking up food, you'll have that food available.
That's right.
Did I understand that right?
You understood it exactly.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. So if anybody's watching that, just verify that all with Philmont before you arrive. That'd be a good idea. Just be prepared, because as we all know, things can change. And so that's awesome, though.
Yeah.
But just verify that would be an option available to you on your trip, right? Yeah. That's great. Okay, so what I heard you say was make sure you're bringing breakfast and lunch type items to supplement, replace items that you can't have.
That's right.
Okay, all right.
And they're trail food, so you don't want to bring something that you have to cook every day for lunch and breakfast. So bring something that's trail food, and then dinner, you can always bring something where you can use hot water, cook, and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, for the exception of a couple of breakfast, which would normally be oatmeal or maybe a Mountain House type meal. For breakfast that you have to cook. For the most part, the breakfast and certainly all the lunches require no cooking.
That's right.
Which is great. Okay. So cleaning dishes sounded pretty easy. Why don't you walk us back through that again?
Well, since I had my own vessels to cook, cleaning dishes is also easier for me because I use my own vessels. I have my own cleaning brush, my own soap. So yeah, you are done with everything that you need before everybody else, which means you get to go to your 10 faster, take more rest compared to the rest of the crew. So yeah, regular Philmont cleaning method, but since you only have maybe a person or two in your troop, in your crew doing special meals, it's much easier for you.
Okay. That just sounds fabulous.
Very fabulous, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So is there anything that you kind of got out there, you're like, man, I wish I had this. This would have made my life so much easier. Looking back on your trek, you've been home for a while. Now, you've had time to reflect on it. Is there anything you can think of that, if I just had this one thing or two things, it would have made my life so much easier? Yeah,
this is what I would say. There are certain brands of power drinks or, the sports drinks that have something that's not vegetarian friendly. I should have planned out better and packed them up so that I could have dropped it off at logistics. That I did not do. So there's a few things that I got on the trail from the crew itself that was a sports drink but not vegetarian friendly. But that's the only thing that I can think of at this point in time.
Okay, so what about equipment-wise? You brought your own pots, but you said they also had sterilized pots provided or available, right? Correct. You had your own stove, right? So you could boil your own meals, right? So we've talked about that stuff. Was there anything else that you felt like you needed equipment-wise?
No, equipment-wise, no, I was good. The Scout is always prepared. So if you have any specific needs, make sure you go through that with your crewmaster or your troop guide. And also call Philmont, and if you can talk to somebody, I would definitely check on that.
Right. Okay. So I guess the word of the wise, as you said, be prepared, get in touch with Philmont, email, phone call, and make sure you're talking to the right person.
Correct.
Right? Just say, hey, this is my issue. This is what I'm concerned about. Can you walk me through what I need to know? And then obviously, as we've discussed, when you arrive at Philmont, first thing you do, hey, Ranger, right? Mr. and Miss Ranger there, I've got this dietary restriction. Let's handle that. Right. Okay, awesome. Is there anything that you would, I mean, you've kind of already talked about all this, but
Right.
just to recap, anything, we talked early on about you wish Philmont had made it a little bit easier to find out the ingredient list. You did the best you could prior to showing up. You said once you showed up that it was fabulous, that the ranger took you to logistics, and then you went to the commissary. Everything was great, right? And so you've talked about being pretty much self-sufficient,
Correct.
right? So it sounds like there really wasn't anything just completely outstanding that is completely broken.
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
My only advice here is, take all you will use all you take, because anything that you take and you won't use is extra weight that you don't want to carry. So plan and prepare.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But then on this flip side, you don't want to take too much.
Correct.
Because then you're just carrying that around uselessly, right?
Right.
Okay. Awesome. So we kind of talked about this a little bit. But when you showed up, let's say at a resupply, I mean, base camp's fairly straightforward because you have everything you could need at base camp, right? I mean, you even have a store, the Tooth of Time Traders, where you could have gone and bought a new stove or whatever, right?
Right.
So we're past all that. You're out on the trail now. So now your options are limited, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you got on the trail, picking up your food from the backcountry commissaries, your crew's picking up their food. Walk me through the experience of you picking up your food.
Absolutely. We had to pick up food at 3 different commissaries on the back trail. And at all those locations, actually, they had my name, my crew number, and then also the meal type. So it was very clearly and very nicely labeled. So there's absolutely no confusion. There's no mixing between, is this mine or is it somebody else on my in my crew? It was all labeled. So I love the fact that Philmont does things very methodically, and I want to take this opportunity to thank them as well.
That's great. So basically, you showed up to the commissary. It wasn't an issue. They were expecting you.
Correct.
They knew exactly what you needed. It was labeled with your name on it, right? Because I know you don't want any hiccups or mistakes,
Right.
and neither does Philmont,
Yeah.
right? They don't want to have to manage that,
Yeah.
right? That is one great thing about Philmont. There is a huge logistical effort. They're very methodical. If you think about it, they have like tens of thousands of kids
right.
going through there every summer,
Exactly. Yeah.
participants, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but they want every individual's participant to be great. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
So now for the question I think a lot of people have that are watching this, if they have a dietary restriction. I just want to remind everybody that you're speaking from the position of being a vegetarian, right? So you didn't necessarily have to battle gluten or kosher meals or anything like that, right? But what food was available for you to eat that Philmont provided?
Well, Philmont has a separate menu for halal, for kosher, and for vegetarians. They also have a few options in there for like gluten-free as well. So as long as you're looking at all the ingredients of what they are providing, and you have the flexibility completely at the day of arrival to go change whatever you want and replace them with what they have. In case they don't have some replacement, that's my earlier point, where you bring your own food and you give it to them instead of what they're going to provide you for that meal. So I want to say, as much anxiety I had going into the trip, this was one of the easiest thing. It turned out to be, I should say, one of the easiest things for me to manage on the trip. So yeah, if you are a special dietary, if you have any special dietary requirements, you can take it from me. I went through it, and Philmont makes it so much easier for you.
That's great. I know we talked about it earlier, and you just mentioned on it again, but I can't imagine how much going to Philmont for a lot of people is stressful enough as it is. A lot of people that go to Philmont, which is fine, it's great. They don't necessarily have all the backcountry experience that some of us have, right? And then to add on to that, the anxiety of what's the food going to be like, which I think for a lot of people is, I don't know, But then now I have, I don't know, I don't know how this is going to go. So that's great to hear that Philmont has made it very accessible, right? And enabled folks that have dietary restrictions to accommodate them as best they can. And it sounds like they've done a fabulous job for that.
Excellent.
I would highly stress that you had a good experience. Everybody's experience is going to be different.
Right.
Prepare all you can, communicate all you can, but maybe don't wig out, right? That you're not going to be the first person probably to show up with X, Y, or Z issue.
That's right.
Maybe, but then it sounds like at the very end of the day, they could have accommodated probably whatever. If you brought your own food, they probably could have figured out a way to accommodate that.
100%.
Right?
Agree.
But they already have in place meal options for the more prominent, religious or dietary restrictions, right? So they already have accommodations for that as standard quo,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So the more exotic your needs are, right? True needs, right? This is not, I really just don't like beef sticks. Well, that's not what we're talking about here. We're like, right?
Yeah.
But the more exotic your needs are, right? I think the lesson to take from that is always, always, always double check with Philmont, check in with them early.
That's right.
And often, just to make sure that when you show up, everything's ready to go.
Yep.
Well, I just want to thank you again so much for taking the time to share your experience with me, but then everybody else who might end up watching this. I know from my own research that as of today, there isn't really much information out there. You tried to get in touch with Philmont. You had some hiccups there. You got through them. But there's really just nothing out there. There's stuff out there for backpacking, just going anywhere backpacking, but not like specific to Philmont.
Correct.
And so I just think this is an amazing experience. I'm very happy that you got to share this with everybody. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your knowledge.
Al, thank you for having me, and thanks to your team at the Friendly Scoutmaster.
So I just want to thank Cy for taking the time to share with us on this channel exactly what his experience was like and to try to give some insight into what it was like for him to go to Philmont and have his experience. Now, of course, he's a vegetarian. There are a lot of different dietary and religious needs out there, but I think generally speaking, they are all kind of handled the same way. All right, so what I want to do before we close this video out is just reinforce a few things. One is this is for religious and dietary restrictions only, okay? Like personally, I don't like chickpeas. Chickpeas has been on the menu at Philmont, and Philmont's not going to make an accommodation for you if you just don't happen to like something, okay? So again, this is just for dietary and religious needs only. 2, make sure you declare everything on your medical form very clearly, legibly, and exactly what medically or religiously that you need, okay? Make sure you bring with you any medication and any EpiPens. Now you have to remember that you're in the backcountry at Philmont. So Philmont does have a tremendous amount of logistical support. Just in general, there are staff camps that are staffed with Philmont staffers. They have wilderness first aid. They have first aid kits. Your crew has to have wilderness first aid and a first aid kit. But for example, if you have a dietary restriction where you eat something and that's going to close down your ability to breathe, okay, you don't have an option to call 911 and expect to be picked up out of the backcountry in the next few minutes and then somehow magically end up in a hospital within the next 20 minutes. That's not going to happen. So you need to understand that going into it. So anything that happens to you in the backcountry, you have to be able to manage in the backcountry. Can they get you out of the backcountry? Absolutely. Will that probably take at the short end a few hours? Most likely, depending on where you are. Okay? So just understand that when you go into this. Okay, number 4. Check in with Philmont Scout Ranch in the fall. I would suggest that probably mid-September, late October, early November. Probably late October, early November. You kind of get through the fall season with the fall adventures. Check in with Philmont Scout Ranch. And when you do, make sure that you are talking to the right person at Philmont. Okay? Explain exactly what your needs are. From that person at this time in the fall, you need to learn what previous accommodations have been, what their anticipated accommodations will be able to provide for you on your upcoming trek that coming summer, assuming you're going on a summer trek, okay? Learn what equipment you need, all right, so that you can practice preparing your meals on your training hikes, okay? Number 5, check back with Philmont in about April. By that time, they should have the anticipated menu for that summer program, and probably also in the fall, if you're doing a fall adventure. Again, make sure you're talking to the right person at Philmont. Ask them if there's any food substitutions that they may be able to provide for your accommodation, okay? Get the ingredient list for every single item. Okay, we're talking about breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and all the drink mixes. Get the ingredient list for all that. Go through all that with a fine-tooth comb, make sure it's compatible with your restriction, okay? Ask Philmont if you can bring your own food. Now, don't expect to get reimbursed for that food, and don't expect a price break on your trip, but ask them if you can bring your own food. Okay, ask them if you do bring your own food, will Philmont be able to deliver your food that you have brought to the backcountry commissaries for you to pick up when your crew is picking up food. Okay, so that way you're not having to carry all 7 or 10 or whatever days worth of food with you from the start. Okay, reconfirm what equipment is available for you to use that Philmont is going to provide. And then, of course, bring to Philmont whatever equipment that you need to make your trip a success, okay? Number 6, bring enough food. It is very common for participants to feel like they are not getting enough calories for the day, okay? That's just a common experience, okay? Make sure that you are bringing enough food so that you are being properly provided for as far as the number of calories and what type of calories. So like number 7, make sure you bring enough protein. You will likely be able to get enough carbohydrates, for example, if you're a vegetarian, but you may not have enough protein. Okay, so make sure you have gone through everything, that you're getting an appropriate amount of carbohydrates, protein, and fat that is compatible with your dietary restriction for every day. And you're going to be burning about 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day, depending on the day and what you're doing. Okay, again, just to reinforce, number 8, some of the drink mixes may not be compatible with your dietary restriction, okay? Number 9, when you arrive at Philmont, inform your ranger right away of what your need is, okay? That should prompt a visit to logistics to make sure that they have your dietary restrictions on file, okay? When you go to the med check, double check with them there. Should also end up at the commissary, okay, to make sure that the commissary has your dietary restrictions. They have the food there that they've told you they would have. And if you can bring your own food, that you are giving them your food so they can deliver it to you in the backcountry, okay? Number 10, before leaving base camp, make sure everything's in order. Okay, make sure you have everything that you need and what you need to make your trip a success. When you leave base camp, your options for making a change in the backcountry are very limited. Okay, there are backcountry stores. Those are kind of spread out. So depending on your itinerary, you may not have access to that store until several days into your trip. So make sure when you leave base camp, you have all the equipment you need. You have all the food that you need when you leave base camp, and any snacks that you're bringing to supplement the food that you're going to be given or have brought or whatever that situation is. Just make sure when you leave base camp, you understand what's going to happen in backcountry and you have everything you need. And then most importantly, I want you to relax and enjoy your adventure. I understand there'll be a little anxiety, a little apprehension, a little nervous anticipation. I hope that through all your preparation that started months and months and months in advance, all right, I hope through all that preparation that you can kind of get through the first day or 2 days, and then you can relax and say, hey, I got this all under control. It's all good. And you can enjoy your adventure. Okay, a scout is prepared. Please do yourself a favor, do your crew a favor, and be as prepared as possible. That all being said, you're going to have an amazing trip, and I want you to have a blessed adventure.
Hey, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you'd like to support this channel, remember, please subscribe to this channel, tell your friends about it. Thanks for hitting that like button. Everything here is free. I want to give back to the community. I want to give to you everything here for free. I've been out in the outdoors for a long, long time, and it's great that I can be able to give all this information to you. That is what's most important to me. If you would like to give back, I do have a GoFundMe page set up, and you can follow the link. And if you'd like to, if you're a youth with your parents' support, I would gladly accept your donations. Thank you and have a blessed day.